Hey, my name is Shalane. I'm with Far Out Tiny Homes. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you are new here, we are a custom tiny home builder out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and our aim is to bring you all the most up-to-date information pertaining to the tiny home lifestyle and container home lifestyle that there is out there right now. If you are returning, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very important topic that we're going to cover. We did cover this in a previous video on the channel when it first had started. Don't worry, the audio is good. But I go into much more depth about this specific topic. So I will link it above here. And if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty, you can dig in there. But here we're going to go over what's available right now and what it means for you as far as finding a place to legally park your tiny home. First, let's discuss some basic information when it comes to parking your tiny home, either within a tiny home community or an RV park. Generally speaking, you are looking at a 30 or 50 amp service. The more amperage you need, the more your per night stay is going to be. The other topic has to do with sewer hookup. Generally speaking, these are just a black pipe that runs out of your tiny home and down into that sewer system. It's a very easy setup. What we have found across the board are many of these tiny home communities where you're going to be staying for longer lengths of time than just a couple of nights. They're going to want you to hard plumb your sewage in with black pipe. So many of these communities, they do want a certified tiny home. So whether that's the RV certification or a NOAA certification, they are looking for some baseline as far as how your home was built and who it was built by. So if you're considering purchasing a tiny home or you're having a tiny home builder build it, those are just the questions that you're going to need to ask. How will my home be certified and what does that mean to me? So in this specific video, we're only going to be discussing rental opportunities. Let's go through a few questions that you really should consider asking the tiny house community manager before making your final decision. So as I stated before, most of these electrical hookups are 30 or 50 amp plug to play. So you're going to want to make sure that you understand what their electrical hookup is, whether they want just a simple plug and play or if they're looking for some sort of hardwire setup. Second, you're going to want to make sure you understand how the plumbing works because these costs add up quickly. And you want to make sure that once you're situated in your home, you understand what it's going to take to legally hook that tiny home up in the community. And number 3 has to do with my own specific preferences, but I would just make sure that nobody is running their home on a generator in the area. And if they are, you might want to say, I don't want to be next to that due to noise or due to the pollution, but I would just check in first. Generally speaking, this is something that you won't see, but it's always good measure just to make sure you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Okay, number 4 all has to do with amenities. Generally, they're about the same, but just make sure you ask with the details. What does my lot rent get me every single month? And then also make sure that you ask if there are varying lot prices based on parcels. So if you're in a crunch and you only have a smaller budget, you might ask if there are smaller parcels currently available, or if you have more of a budget and you're interested in more of a yard space, just ask the question, what size parcels are available, or is everything kind of the same? So number 6 has to do with parking spaces. Generally across the board, you're allowed 2 parking spaces per lot rent, but that can fluctuate. So just check in and make sure that you know exactly how many parking spaces there will be allotted to you and exactly where they are located on the lot. Now, many of us living the tiny home lifestyle have an outdoor shed for extra items such as seasonal, outdoor gear, maybe bikes, sleds, recreation stuff. So just make sure that if you are one of those folks that you're able to bring your shed along with you or purchase a shed in the future. Sometimes those tiny home communities and RV communities will accept them. Sometimes they won't. So if that's a big item for you, make sure you ask them if that's okay. Now, as we near the end of this preliminary checklist, many of you are on the road and have composting toilets. So you're going to need to ask the community manager if this is going to be an issue. If you have, a holding tank, is that something that they're going to allow into their facility? If you have a composting toilet, is that okay? And if so, how is that going to work while you're staying in your tiny home in this community? And just be very blunt. Let them know exactly what you're working with so when you get there, there aren't any surprises, or at least very few. So number 9 was a big one for me, and this one was, will my yard be fenced? Obviously, we have quite a few dogs in our family, and we wanted to make sure that when we let them out in the morning or at night, they aren't going to run off. And so having a fence was definitely a prerequisite for me to sign a lease anywhere. And if they are going to have a fence, will it be constructed upon my arrival? Will I need to schedule at a later date to have it installed? And who pays for it? Am I paying for the material and you all are going to set it up? Or are you going to pay for it and set it up? How does that work and how does that look? And last, number 10, will there be any further on-site prep for me to do? So when we moved into the RV park that housed our first tiny home, there was a lot of prep work to do that we weren't anticipating. Some of the trees needed to be trimmed. There were big rocks everywhere that had to be combed out of the dirt. There was a lot of rusty nails and metal pieces also within the dirt, which obviously you don't want those jamming up the tires in your tiny home and causing a really ridiculous situation for you. So I would just make sure that they do some sort of site prep, or you understand what site prep is going to be needed before you arrive with your tiny home. But I would really approach this as an interview process. You really need to get to know the energy of the manager on site and the energy of the community. Understand what you're getting yourself into as much as you can before you sign your name on the dotted line. So before we get into the list of tiny home communities, please take a second and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you want to continue your tiny home journey, we would love to be looked at as a resource for the most up-to-date content out there. Okay, so let's get down into the reason why we are here. We're gonna go in alphabetical order. Now, obviously, not all states have legal tiny home parking for both short-term and long-term rental. So I'm gonna give you what I have here. I'm also going to link in the description this nifty PDF that I put together with links to all of the communities I am going to talk about right now. It also has all sorts of information on what you need to look out for as you're starting your journey in your tiny home life as far as renting land is concerned. There also is a little bit of information on purchasing parcels of land for your tiny home. This packet is chocked full of information, and again, the link is below. So if you'd rather just go right now and download it and have it, you can skip right now and go to that. If you want to follow along with me, let's get started. Our first stop is in Lakeside, Arizona. This is strictly a tiny home community, and it is called Lux Tiny Home. Your basic amenities are included within your rental. So you have your water, your sewer, and your garbage and recycling. So Lux Tiny Home community looks to be more searching for long-term community residents versus short-term. So this might be for somebody or a family looking to relocate for 6+ months within a community versus a short-term stay of less than 6 months, maybe 1 to 5 months. Now we're gonna head over to California. So our first stop, and if I am saying this incorrect, I apologize. Isleton, California, Isleton. I've never been there, but there is a tiny home community called Delta Bay. And again, they are offering the basic amenities. And then we head over to Lemon Cove, California, where there is the Lemon Cove Village RV. This is a mix of tiny homes and RVs. And it looks like they have both short-term, so folks coming in and out, and long-term parking. We're gonna head down now to San Diego, where the famous tiny house block community is located. This community is really cool because they offer spaces for if you have a tiny home, but they also offer long-term rentals for folks that don't have a tiny home and want to try it out. So this is an opportunity for you to try on tiny. Head over to San Diego for a couple months, stay in a tiny home, and see if it really resonates with you. So I absolutely adore this. We can't wait to actually vacation there because they do short-term rentals and long-term rentals. Plus they have rent your own land or rent the tiny home on a land. And their prices are super affordable as well, especially when you're considering living in San Diego. So again, that link will be in that PDF that I've put together, but definitely check it out if you're thinking about moving to California. All right, so let's head over to a bit of a colder state, Colorado. Our first stop is in Durango, Colorado, and this is the Escalante Village. And unfortunately, they are at capacity at the moment. I did check this Sunday, which is 11:15, what was going on there. This space looks to be absolutely gorgeous, and this is a tiny home community with all of your basic amenities included in your rent. We're gonna head down to Leedville, Colorado. Now this looks to be a short-term rental situation, kind of the same as in the tiny house block in San Diego, where you can try on tiny. Now I couldn't find any information if they offered any parcels with long-term rental, but I thought it was so cool anyway, because if you don't wanna go all the way to California to try on tiny, just head out to Colorado. And then our last stop is in Woodland Park, Colorado, and this is an RV park that has now accepted tiny homes. So it's going to be your basic amenities with those setup options that we discussed before. Now we're headed east and we're going to Florida. So Tampa Bay, Florida, they have a tiny home community called Circle Pond. It looks adorable. And then Orlando, Florida, which unfortunately is full at the moment. It's called Orlando Lakefront. And this tiny home community looks gorgeous as well. So definitely check those out. We're gonna head over to Georgia, Guyton, Georgia. And we were actually contacted by this organic farm that will allow tiny home folks to stay on the property. I don't remember if he said there was a monetary exchange, but the owner of the farm did say that you're able to live there and work. One item to consider that that the owner was very outspoken about was there are no pit bulls allowed on site. So if you have a pit, unfortunately, this little community won't work for you. But if you're into organic farming and are into like a work trade situation, definitely check him out. So I did ask about a website, and all he has right now is his Facebook page, but he's super active on Facebook. We're gonna head over to Michigan, in Acme, Michigan. I hope I'm saying that right. This is an RV park that now accepts park models. So not so much a tiny home community, but if you have a park model and you're looking for somewhere that accepts park models, so a bigger tiny home, then this might be an option for you. Headed down to Minnesota, Ogilvie? I'm not sure. It's Ogilvie in Minnesota. They do have a tiny house village there, and it looks to be beautiful as well. There was another one that I found in St. Paul, Minnesota, but it really seems like more of a conceptual tiny home village where they really haven't implemented anything yet. I put both those links in that PDF file, so you can go check it out for yourself. We're gonna head over to Missouri, more so Kansas City, Missouri. There's a Facebook page I linked within the packet, and it's more of like a homesteading setup. I would reach out to them on Messenger and kind of seek more information. I didn't get a lot of information on this, but it is available and the information is out there if you need it. We're gonna head over to New Mexico. Aztec, New Mexico. This is another Facebook page setup of somebody that's offering space for a tiny home. And then we're gonna head over to Rio Communities, New Mexico. And this is a brand new tiny home community. This tiny home community offers all of your basic amenities. It's in New Mexico. Now we're gonna come all the way to Nevada, which is where we are at. And there are 2 manufactured home communities here that will accept tiny homes. I have linked them in the description. They are standard setup and basic amenities are covered in your lot rent. We're headed back to the East Coast into North Carolina. In Mills River, North Carolina, there is a tiny home and a park model community with all the basic amenities and setup requirements. From North Carolina, we're gonna go over to Ohio. And in New Paris, Ohio specifically, there is a tiny home village called Cedar Springs. They have the basic amenities and there are spaces currently available. And then to Oregon, where I'm from, we're gonna head over to Wildport, which is right on the coast. Wildport is one of my favorite coastal towns. My favorite is Yachats, which is like 10 minutes away from Wildport. They have a really nice tiny home community there. The only caveat is that your home must be RV certified. So just take that into consideration as you're looking, but they have the basic amenities. You know, the lot rent is about the same, from $400 to $700, and you're on the Oregon coast where it's beautiful. I mean, beautiful in the sense that you like dark, cold, and rainy. So now we're gonna head over to Texas, more specifically a city named Spur. So this city is a very, very, very small city in Texas, and they are accepting tiny homes. Their land is very inexpensive currently to buy, and you can place your tiny home on a parcel. So if you have, 30 grand and you want to buy some acreage and not get hassled by zoning and planning, this might be an option for you. And that about wraps up all of our tiny home communities. If you found that you know of a different tiny home community in your area, or you would like to be put on our list, please reach out to us, farouttinyhomes@gmail.com, and we would love to add you to this list. We are asked on the daily, where can I find tiny home parking? So we're really hoping to keep this list up to date. Well, that's all for today, you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's keep this conversation going. If you have more questions, leave the questions in the comments below. I will be more than happy to answer them, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Keep it groovy.